You're listening to the To Write Love on Our Arms podcast, a show about mental health and the things that make us human. So this is one of two of our dedicated episodes for suicide prevention, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Deanna Zandt. She's a writer and award-winning technologist living in Brooklyn, New York. She spent 15 years working at the forefront of social justice, technology, and media. And after she burned out for the third time, she realized that maybe that work wasn't suiting her particularly well. Currently, she spends her time supporting other very impressive people and organizations behind the scenes with their technology, writing and drawing when she feels like it, walking and playing with her two dogs and their friends. The dog's friends?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big family. Big dog family.
I love dogs and friends and dogs having friends. And also connecting with humans near and far, figuring out how to exist with meaning, fulfillment, and as many giggles as possible. Deanna, thank you so much for joining us today. Where are you? You're in Brooklyn currently?
I am in Brooklyn currently. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here.
No worries. It's a thrill to be with you. We first learned about you through a piece on Medium. This actually all came into focus through our editor and producer, Becky, doing some research. And I stumbled across a piece that you wrote in 2018 that was called "Why You Are Loved" and "Please Reach Out Are Crappy Things to Post After Someone Has Died by Suicide." That is... we're definitely sympathetic to elongated titles, and we think that it's important. It begs a question. You got us hooked. We identify a problem, and now we want to learn how to do better. So, could you start just by telling us what inspired you to write a piece about suicide, and maybe just sharing just some of the context on how suicide has impacted your life?
Sure. I wrote the piece because I was mad. Most things that I make are because I got mad at some point and went, and fingers fly on keyboards and pencils fly in hands. And so that's what happens. But I got really frustrated. It was the week that Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain both died by suicide, and people were understandably really, really devastated. It was just an unbelievably painful cultural moment to lose people that were really admired, that their work, was really beloved. And so people started posting things online saying, as the title says, if you're feeling like this, just know you are loved. And if you're feeling this way, please reach out to me. I'm here for you. And I completely understand the sentiment of that, right? Like, I completely understand the intention, but the people that were posting those things to me seemed like, okay, you've never actually experienced what it's like to be in the dark waters, as I call them, and swimming in the dark waters. And with my own experience, I think my own experience with suicide ideation is probably on the less intense end of things, in that I've never planned anything, I've never attempted, but still pretty scary for someone who's never had ideation at all. My whole thing was that I was in so much emotional pain and dealing with physical stuff and physical ramifications of that I wanted to be rid of my pain. I didn't want my life to end, but I did not want to live in pain anymore. And I think that that's a really common thread that I hear from other people. Once I started talking about it, of course, you get other people kind of in the conversation. And I thought at the time, before I started sharing this stuff, when it really, really kicked in the probably different times, but really excessively from 2006 to about 2013, I thought that everyone had these feelings all the time, and that I just couldn't handle it, that I was weak, that I didn't have the skills, or that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, that I couldn't handle what everyone else was obviously feeling it all the time. And so so when I was looking at this, "You Are Loved," I'm like, I know I know I'm loved, but everything really hurts.
Mm.
And that's not the point. And so, yeah, I decided to write a little bit about what it's like to be on the other side, at least from my own experience.
Thank you so much for sharing. You brought out a fascinating perspective there, one that even after 14 years of working in this world, it felt a little unfamiliar, but I think even then full of grace. You mentioned believing that there were other people who felt this way, who felt despair, who felt pain unimaginable, and seeking options to relieve such pain. And you figured that there was something unique about your situation and that you were handling it perhaps worse than others that you imagine. I feel like so often people don't share how they feel because they're afraid that what they're feeling is utterly unrelatable.
Yeah,
Whereas,
and, like, I didn't
yeah,
know it was wrong, like, even I was in therapy at the time, and I wasn't sharing until it really, like, became overwhelming where I got to the point where I wasn't functioning very well as a, like, a grown human who needed to, like, work and pay rent.
hmm,
Um, and when I went to see I had opted finally to get medication, and to go on antidepressants, and I had been basically putting it off. I'd been recommended it when I was a young adult in college and put it off for basically 20 years. 20 years later, I'm sitting in front of a prescribing shrink and I'm describing how I'm feeling, to a brand new person basically. It's from, not my regular talk therapist, and he said, "How long have you been this depressed?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not depressed. I just can't do anything that I want to do." Like, it still wasn't clicking for me
yeah,
that, this was the point that I was at. And I think that there's something about, since that time have worked with a different therapist who's really wonderful, has introduced me to dialectical behavior therapy.
yeah, big
I think
DBT
you all
fan
have
over
covered.
here.
Yeah, big DBT fan. But just the idea in DBT that you start by naming your emotion in every session was radical for me to be able to say, "Oh, I'm sad. I feel sad. I feel sad. I am not a sad person, but I feel sad right
Hmm,
now." Or I'm not a happy person, but I feel happy right now. Whatever, like that practice is really groundbreaking, and it can shift things. So yeah, I wasn't even reporting my symptoms because I didn't know they were symptoms. I just thought, my God, I can't cope. Like, I can't do this. I can't human like the other humans.
yeah. Was there any degree to which you related to the idea of being a burden, of maybe what you were going through, or the things that you wish you could feel but you can't, the things you wish you could do but couldn't, that they weren't worth sharing because you don't want to bring someone else down. You don't want to weigh
Oh,
down the
yeah.
room. You don't want to be something carried or dragged or even cared for, you know?
Even cared for, yeah. I think that that was something else that was a radical shift for me was, later than becoming friends with people for whom, um this wasn't burdensome, that this was like, no, this is everyday life that we share, and we swim in these waters together, and that's how we do.
Yeah.
And that was just an entirely different experience. The whole burden thing is so insidious. It is
Hmm.
insidious in every way when the demons latch on to the feeling of you're burdening someone else with your problems, or you're burdening them because you need care, or you're burdening them because you can't work right now and somebody else has to do the work, whatever that work is. Um whatever, parenting, all of those things, like, you feel that demon latch on, and it is so hard to get rid of.
Hmm.
And yeah, the burden thing, it's a lie. It's a lie.
Yeah.
That's what I keep wanting to scream is like, "Oh, burden. You are not a burden. You are a human. You are a fully formed human living in a world that is very, very challenging.
Dan, you strike me as someone overflowing with empathy. And I saw a ton of that empathy in this piece that you wrote. And I think
Thank you.
so much of it, as we talk about suicide prevention, as we talk about just the problem of suicide, so often it's just relegated to conversations of being a mental health problem.
Mhm.
When we know that this is a human health problem, that there are physical health factors, there are social health factors, there are
Yeah.
community health
I mean,
factors that
the systemic issues that are associated with depression and suicide ideation and attempts. For me, as a social justice oriented person, like I kind of always look towards like, well, what are the systemic things? When you look at suicide rates among farmers,
mm,
that particular kind of despair, that of the despair of livelihood, of not being able to uh, provide for your family of any gender. It's generally considered a very masculine thing, but it's among all genders. Um, is just stunning, and that is purely systemic. That is purely a fault of this particular version of capitalism that we live in.
yeah, let's expand it to a cultural health
Yeah,
problem, right?
yeah.
So again, like just kind of riding that wave of empathy, just even mentioning our friends that work in agriculture and farming and
Mm.
food production, textile production, you name whatever there is to be farmed out there. This requires, this being suicide prevention, requires, like you mentioned, way more than just giving someone the right platitude at the right time, of just giving that encouragement so that they can get through this. It isn't an us and them thing. It's
Yeah,
only us. We have to be a piece of the equation. And that's going to require imagination, of stepping
yeah.
outside of your own lived experience to empathize with the livelihood of someone else, and also active community making. Ask the questions. Where your imagination ends,
100%.
that's when communication needs to ramp up and see where people are. And communication has to leave room for a response. So,
Yeah.
Deanna, if I'm just going to come to you going through a crisis saying you are loved, period, end of conversation, right? That's not, that doesn't do you justice. That doesn't do this conversation justice. Please reach out, period. Okay,
Yeah. Please reach out.
clearly
That was
there's
my
ways
I'm
that
like, "Huh? Do you know how hard it is to reach out? Like, I
yeah.
can't pick up my phone off of the coffee table." Like,
Mm,
like I can't, let alone like call someone and say, I would like to not be alive anymore. Like, how do you
yeah.
start that conversation? And like, hey girl, so I'm thinking that being on the planet is shitty. So I'm gonna go. Like, you can't, like, there's no script for that. There's no cultural
Yeah.
space for that. There's no any of that. And I think you're spot on too when you're talking about making it cultural, that it takes community, because everything, particularly in American society, is so individualistic, right?
Mm.
Like, we're all talking about self-care right now. This is another big bugaboo of mine. But anyway, that like, oh well, if you just buy this $85 self-care kit, you'll be fine, you'll be able to take care of yourself. And it's like, no, this is like, we need community care, we need structural care, we need all different kinds of care. And it's the same with our health, with our cultural health and mental health.
You mentioned just the individualistic culture that
Yeah.
we're a part of, and we've established that community requires communication. I'm not a linguist, but I assume those have a common root.
They do.
Um,
They do.
but
Good
let's
job.
talk a bit
Good job.
about yeah. There you go. Hey, so shout out to all my etymologists out there. Um, But let's talk a little bit about what you laid out in this piece. You identified saying, ending these phrases with periods isn't all that
Mhm.
helpful. But what are the ways that we can end it with question marks? That we can invite a response, leave room and space for a response to happen at whatever rate that is gonna happen. Uh,
Yeah.
so let's, perhaps diving in a little bit
Yeah.
point by point. Again,
Sure.
within the piece, you highlight ways in which people, friends, family members, and so on, can reframe how they show up for loved ones who may be
Yeah.
feeling suicidal. So, point number
Sure.
one is often, and you mentioned this earlier, often the person who's struggling can't reach out. This isn't an issue of
Yeah.
don't want to, it's can't find the steps one, two, and three to reach out.
Yeah. The wherewithal. I mean, to the point where I was speaking to a friend recently and we were sort of, dark humor. Talk about gallows humor is talking to your friends and making jokes about ideation. And I said, they were sharing with me that they were having some really, really self-harm oriented thoughts. And I said, "Do you feel like you want to plan something? Are you looking at plan?" And they were like, "It's too much work. I'm too tired." And I was like, "I get that." So it's like
Mm,
if you're even in the like it's too much work to even, go down that road. Like, how are you going to pick up the phone and call someone and you don't know what to say and kind of all of those things. So yeah, that's kind of the first piece. And then the second piece of that, I feel like um where it gets into community is that if you're noticing that people are kind of dropping out, are kind of, not presenting okay or whatever, um, it's okay to notice that and to tell them, "Hey, I noticed that you don't seem to be feeling okay. What can I do?" Like
mm,
a really great phrase from a friend of mine, Jean Russell, runs this project called Thrivability. Um, she taught me the question, "How can I support you right now?"
mm,
And I nearly melted the first time she asked me that. I was ranting and stuff because she really didn't know what to do. I was ranting, I was very angry and da, 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 and she just looks at me with her giant pretty eyes and says, "How can I support you right now?" And I've latched onto that ever since. There's not that you have to have the answer, and just saying, "Hey, I see you and I see your pain and I'm with you and I love you," is sometimes the only thing that you need to do. There's not necessarily you can't fix it. Don't recommend how to fix it. Don't
mm.
do that unless they've asked you for advice.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point, and in a way that we devalue or misvalue the role of empowerment in these
Mhm.
conversations. That someone walking through a suicidal crisis, they oftentimes, I don't want to speak for everyone's experience, but I know
Sure.
looking through my own experience, I didn't want to be fixed. I,
Mm-mm.
I just wanted to be, I wanted to find a reason to continue being.
Mhm.
And you're right. It wasn't enough for someone to, I didn't want someone to wave a magic wand and for it to all go away, because if it was that easy to fix, then, that's almost painful if it could just be
Yeah.
wished away.
Yeah.
um, I wanted there to be someone that would validate my perspective, that would
Yeah.
agree with me that this sucked, and in time, what I found to be most helpful was someone who didn't have all the answers for me, but gave me some options on where we can move forward to. So,
Yeah.
Chad, hey, whatever you want to do is fair game. If you want to go see a counselor, hey man, I'll do the research for you.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you need to call a hotline, buddy, I will sit right here in the sofa and hold your hand through it.
Yep.
If you want to just set up a weekly coffee check in, let's do
Yeah.
that. We'll put it on the calendar right now. So my friend wasn't telling me what to do, but
Right.
reminding me that there are options on
Yes.
some steps to take.
And
Um,
that and in those options, that means that somebody else has already been through this, already thought about it, and already, kind of done some of that work versus like, where do you even start? I mean, because that's the other thing when somebody's in crisis, this is something that I help out help friends out with a lot is if you're in crisis or you decide it's time for you to, seek some sort of therapeutic help and support in your life, where do you even start?
Yeah.
It's like insurance, I don't, but how do you find it? I've had so many people ask me, how do I find a therapist? That I've started like a spreadsheet of therapists that I can like recommend to different people wherever they are. And just like that kind of thing. Or like saying, it's really, really hard to find a therapist and I will help you do that. That's
Yeah.
something I can do. Obviously within your own boundaries and whatever you're able to give, because I think that's the other thing is people who are in a supportive role don't necessarily realize that their job is not to fix it. It is just to be there.
Yeah.
It can feel so scary to be the person who's like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to save my friend's life right now. It's like, no, you are not trying to save their life. You are just showing up for your friend. How can you show up for your friend? That's all you need to do. That's it. Draw the line.
You were mentioning in your own personal practice of caring for friends, of being present and being there for friends,
Yeah.
research that is being done not in the midst of crisis, plans being made when stress levels are lower, more
Yeah.
manageable, and
Yeah.
building up this muscle memory. So when this happens, I know how to react. And I just want to applaud that. And again, empower anyone watching this or listening to this that these are steps that you can take in this moment. You can push pause on this podcast and go
Yeah.
to
Do it.
twaloha.com/find help and memorize some of these resources. If you don't want to memorize it, just take screenshots.
Yeah.
But the resources do indeed exist. And it's never going to be a waste of time to learn about uh, how big our safety nets can be and ways that we
Can
can
be.
continue to grow them and weave them together. So way to do the work right there. I need to I need to keep moving. That was all on point
Yeah,
one,
yeah, yeah.
by the way. So
Oh my god.
whoops. So let's go ahead and move a bit
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
into point two, which builds off point one appropriately. Point one being often the person who's struggling can't reach out, and then you build on that, saying because they are unable to reach out, it can become our responsibility to start the conversation
Yeah.
or make an effort to check in. We were just kind of dancing around that point, but to whatever degree you want to
Yeah.
dress that up a bit more, what does it look like to accept that responsibility? What does starting the conversation look
Yeah.
like in the midst of some deep-seated fears about where that conversation may lead?
Um, Absolutely, because that can I think that fear is what stops a lot of people. I don't know what to say. I don't know what I can handle. I don't know any of those things, which is okay. That's totally okay not to know. In the piece, I reference an example of an internet friend of mine, who I think I've only met in person maybe once or twice at conferences, but from my political organizing days, saw one of my tweets where I was just in just such rageful despair that I felt, yeah, clearly real bad. And he DM'd me, and I have screenshots of it with his permission in the piece, but he was basically just like, "Hey, I see you and it looks like you're in a lot of pain and I'm really sorry. I know I don't know you that well, but it hurts to see you hurting and that's not your burden. Like don't take that on, but I just want you to know that I remember you and I remember you as this really kind, fun person and I think you're great and we discussed for a minute and then he ended the conversation with stay well, even mostly strangers love you. And that was just so different than just saying, well, you are loved. Like he just added something to that and it took the sharp edge off for me. It took the
Hmm.
sharp edge off of I am alone in this despair and this is never going to end, because it's easy to get there. So, um and the third point of it, he reached out with his comfort, um, and made sure that I knew that his worry wasn't my fault or my concern or my burden,
Mm,
and I didn't even need to respond. Starting any conversation with, "Hey, no need to respond, but I love you and I see you and I'm with you." Sometimes that's all it takes. That's all it takes. So yeah, that was, that and the, combined with that thing in the 3rd point, which is, a great, theory that I saw in the LA Times, and it's called the silk ring theory. Uh, and it's the silk ring theory of comfort. And it was written by a cancer survivor and her partner. They wrote this piece together about like basically what not to say to someone with cancer. And I feel like very similar stuff can apply to people who are dealing with a variety of other kinds of health crises. But the idea is that the person who is suffering is in the center, and then there's concentric rings out going out from that person. And so if you're on a ring around that person, you only add comfort in towards the middle of the ring, towards that person, towards the people closest to them. And the people who are further away, your friends who may not be related to this person, whatever, you get to dump out to them. You get to complain to them. You get to say, this hurts. You get to say, I'm scared. You get to say all of those things going outward towards the circle, but only comfort goes in. Only, how can I support you?
mm,
Uh, I'm here with you and I love you, is this theory. And I think that that's just such an easy thing to remember of like, okay, you know, uh, person, friend in crisis, comfort, just comfort. That's all I need to do is comfort.
yeah. And comfort being, like we mentioned earlier, so much more than a bumper sticker doctrine.
Oh my God.
Your bumper stickers make poor band-aids, and band-aids are not there to mend broken hearts. You need some deep therapy. And it's important to notice that therapy doesn't always just look like therapists. Sometimes
Mhm.
it simply means yielding to a process. So
Sure.
just a minute of Chad vulnerability. I
Yeah,
loved
bring it.
so many words that you mentioned. You mentioned someone's presence, taking the edge off.
Yeah.
Those were words, Deanna, that were actually said to me by my father. I lost my mother back day after Valentine's Day this year after
Oh
a long
God.
battle with ALS, and
Oh, I'm so
I
sorry.
lived with my dad during the last couple days of mom's life, um, and the weeks that followed, and he he mentioned those words, just being there, um, took the edge off. It blunted
Mhm.
some of those edges, and
Mhm.
that struck me as so poetic. So hearing
Yeah.
that from someone else, someone I just met today, is an incredible comfort. And with that, talking about this silk ring theory of comfort, and who can I voice my pain to? It's important to have outlets for your own pain.
Mhm.
It's important to
Mhm.
realize that even if you weren't the partner or spouse or child or parent of a loss, of a grief impacting moment, that this can
Yep.
still affect you. And
Yeah.
that's okay that it does. But be
Yes.
mindful of where you are getting your comfort from, and how you can pour comfort onto others. So like you mentioned, and we'll have that diagram available as well, but look at these circles, map yourself on the circle, not as a way to humble yourself or to elevate yourself, but just to be aware of how many people are
Yes.
affected. And I remember at the visitation, it was very odd seeing people come up to me, and almost expecting me to give them comfort,
Yes.
and telling me about, I'd known your mother for 6 years, and man, did I love her. And I wanted to say, well, I guess that makes two of us. Like,
Yeah.
what do
Like,
you want
what do you want
from
from me?
me? Like,
Exactly.
and that's where, I rest heavily on wisdom from traditions like our Jewish brothers and sisters,
Hell
who
yeah.
have a tradition of sitting shiva,
It's the
of
best.
being just present
Present.
for 7 days, not
Yeah.
fixing it, not
Yeah.
not heaping more pain onto the family, but being a sort of sponge for
Yeah.
that.
And
Whatever
bringing
they
food, food
bringing
always.
food, making plans on their behalf, doing whatever you can
Mhm.
just to sit with the weight of it all, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Uh, that
And
can
asking
totally.
like I was just thinking of other situations too where another friend in crisis, I said, I'm going to come over and spend time with you. And when I got there, I said, would you like to talk about what's going on? Can I tell you funny stories that have been happening to distract you? Do you want some distraction or comfort? Do you want to turn on the TV? Like what would feel okay for right now? And who knows? She might have been talking about this endlessly for hours with other people, and by the time I got there, she just wanted to turn on brain candy Netflix shows and just be together, and that would have been fine too. And so even saying, just again coming back to that, how can I support you right now, and offering those choices can make all the difference in the world. It's so another one that I like is there's a web comic called Robot Hugs. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
Only it's your fault that I am. But
it's so great. There are so many good health related comics in their archive. And the comic that I'm thinking of has one person is very sad and the other person says, what do you need right now? And the person who's very sad says, I don't know. And the person offering support says, would you like me to make you a blanket nest and lay in it with you? And the person says, okay. And then just the final thing is them just like nestled up in a blanket nest on the floor. And it's like, it can be that simple. It can be that simple. Just a
and
blanket nest.
and it can be that absurd.
Yeah.
I don't know if the word blanket nest really fully existed until Robot Hugs put it on the printed page. But if you are navigating something that seems senseless, then we can throw some other senseless things at it to see
Oh,
if it
yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Granted that those other senseless things can combat the confusion and aid in a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Let's talk about posture for a second.
Okay.
We we agree that words are important.
Mhm.
And when we say words are important, how words are shared are also important. So
Yes.
saying, using this phrase, you are loved, that's not a bad phrase in and
Right.
of itself, but context is the sovereign power here.
Yeah.
So
It
that
always
passive
is.
voice
Oh
that
my
you
God.
mentioned, you are loved. Okay. What's a way to make that more personal, more active? Hey, I love you. How can I show you I love you? How can I communicate this love? Let's talk about the passive voice
My
and
God. The
and
passive
and ways that
voice.
we can curtail that, ways that we can
Mhm.
address that. And this isn't to browbeat anyone that has employed these before, but we're all learning.
No,
So
no.
what are some new ways that we can go about expressing something that is true in ways that
It
can be more readily received?
And just to clear up, like, the reason why "You Are Loved" bugs me so much is not the sentiment behind it, but the passive voice is like, I interpret it when I say "You are loved," it's like, well, we're not sure who or
Mm.
where they are, but probably someone somewhere loves you. It's like it's just this vague, cloudy thing, and it's like when you're in crisis, you are looking for a thread to grab onto, and a thread is, um, saying, I love you and I care about you, and I hope you decide to stay here on the planet with me. And I think that part of that frustration too, and this happened quite a bit. I was really overwhelmed by it when Robin Williams passed away, and so many people were like, "Oh, didn't he know how loved he was?" And it was like, yeah, I'm sure he did, but that didn't alleviate the pain that he was feeling, for whatever variety of reasons now that we're understanding, that the complications of his death. Um, you're reacting to something that is very acute and very, very painful. And thinking about how much people love you does not take that pain away. Uh, it kind of sometimes makes it worse because you feel like a burden. You get back to the burden. So being active, and again, just asking the question, how can I show up for you? Just saying, I'm with you.
I wanna rest on that. You credit your friend Vu, who gifted you this phrase, "I'm with you, I'm here," and that immediately took me to the beginning of the pandemic. We were part of a virtual music festival that was called Alone Together, and I was introduced to an up and coming EDM producer. Her name is Jana. You can find her name. It's spelled JVNA, and she performed a
Mhm.
song called "I'm with You," and
Mm.
that's the chorus, that's the refrain. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. And like just in the thick of the pandemic, not knowing how to connect with other people, hearing
Yeah.
those words were a balm. Um,
Yeah.
and being able to trust that person again, that there is no passive voice because someone has already inserted their reality into yours. I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's not some ethereal
Yeah.
hypothetical something's with
Concrete.
you. You're
Yeah.
it's
Somewhere.
but
Hopefully.
it even goes a step beyond just saying you're not alone. It's saying I
Yeah,
am the proof that you're not alone.
exactly. I
I
am
am
with
here
you.
with you.
And placing
Mm,
yourself in it, and in deep with it. It also reminds me of, Vu, who is just an incredible human, set up the National Suicide Hotline and several other hotlines related to it, domestic violence hotline, a bunch of different things. Has done trauma recovery and communities affected, by folks who have died by suicide, and just
mm,
has been deep in it. We were working on a project together, which ended up becoming the weather report, which I'll send y'all a link to. But we wanted it to be different, than other mental health tools. And we started talking about other campaigns and other tools, that had kind of passed over our radar. And at the time, it was just at the tail end of the It Gets Better campaign for
yeah.
queer and trans kids, which is a really great message in one sense where you can, I remember I cried when I saw Tim Gunn's It Gets Better video.
Mm.
Like I would just like wept and I was like, Tim Gunn, I love you so much. But, as Boo and I were talking about it, he was like, yeah, but what about the kids that are really in it right now? Like those teens that are really struggling, and you're saying like, "Oh yeah, in 10 years after you go to college it'll be fine." Well, it's like, "Well, no, things suck now." Things suck now. And it just hearing someone else say, "Yes, things suck now," and not "it will get better later," or "you will get help," or "you will this," or "you will," like, just no, things suck now and I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's what
Yeah,
we ended
and
up calling the project before it became the weather report. We called it Things Suck Now.
Things like that. Well, and I think that that's so important to also acknowledge that our language around mental health has to change. We're talking about a
Mhm.
campaign that's over a decade old
Yeah.
at this point, and in the moment, it was good, but we
Mhm.
don't need to hitch our wagon to good things when we can continue to do a little bit better.
Yeah, and
So
evolve with it.
let's talk about the weather report that was
Yeah.
developed in order to to do a little bit better, push the ball forward. Let's see where this conversation goes. So give us a quick boilerplate on the weather report.
It is a wee tiny tool. And I think the URL is get.theweatherreport.org. I'll double check that. And it is just a little simple form that you can fill out that says, this is what's going on right now. This is how I feel about what's going on right now. This is what I need right now, and this is what I don't need right now. So, born out of that situation where the use case originally was a friend of a friend was going through a divorce and was exhausted from having to tell everyone about the divorce, about how she's doing, get all kinds of unsolicited advice, hear all kinds of terrible things about her ex, which she also didn't, I think, want to hear. Like all, and so Vu was the one that actually came up with this idea. Like, what if we could just, like, wouldn't it be great if you could just send somebody a link and be like, this is what's up, and be really explicit about what your needs and what you're not needing right now, and then be able to share something maybe a little bit fun. Like, we included this section that's what's getting me through right now. This piece of music is getting me through. Rewatching all of Mad Men is getting me through right now. Like whatever the thing was. So yeah, it's just this tiny little form, and then you have a little private link when you're done, and you can send that link to people, or you can just keep it amongst yourselves. And we heard just really great responses from it. And again, I think this was like almost 10 years ago that we made this, but it's still up. Where people were using it in all kinds of use cases, where there was a group of friends using it as their weekly check-in. They all sent each other. It was a group of 5 friends that all lived in different geographies. And so they used this tool, just not even because anyone was in crisis, but just because like that was an easy way for them to check in with one another.
Such a great story that feeds perfectly into the next point. That suicide prevention we mentioned earlier, that is suicide prevention. Weekly check-ins with friends outside of the context of 911 calls and 988 calls and crisis. Suicide prevention happens daily, hourly,
Absolutely.
minute by minute. How we're practicing self-care and how we are anticipating ways that we can care for others. So in the spirit of that anticipation, you mentioned the necessity of putting preemptive systems into place with family or friends or whomever else you welcome into your story, putting those systems into place to combat mental well-being challenges.
Yeah.
What are some practical ways that you have seen, that you have implemented, that beyond the weather report, of ways that people can make plans ahead of time in anticipating caring for others?
One that I used, this actually, this, I'm like, buckle up, kids. We're settling in for another story. All right, let me tell you about back in the day. No, it's not that old. My best friend and I, we're each other's heterosexual life partners. We're planning our retirement together. We've been through everything together. My best friend, Sin, she had a friend who passed away in the night suddenly and unexpectedly. And she ended up with a lot of anxiety about this in the weeks afterwards, because she realized, she's like, I live alone. Like, how will someone know? Like, my cat is going to eat my face. I'm going to be one of those people. Like, what's going to happen? And I was like, oh my God, wait, I live alone too. My dog's going to eat my face. Like, what's going to happen? And so, when she was really, we were just texting about it, and I was like, should we just check in with each other every day? Like, just like say good morning, and then like have a plan. Like, if we don't hear from each other by like a certain hour, then, we do something about that. And So that's what we started doing, and I think we've been friends for 20 years, but we've been doing it for maybe 10 now, every single morning. We tend to, we're both Gen X, so we like Bitmojis, and we just send each other a hilarious Bitmoji every day, just to get started. And sometimes that's the only thing that ever happens is just it's such a hectic day, but I know that she didn't die in the night. I didn't die in the night. And she knows that and whatever. And we have, the emergency system. There was one point where I didn't hear back from her. I tried to call her by at the time where we had said like, okay, if you don't hear from me by this time, couldn't reach her. And then started reaching out to her little list of people that she said, here's my order of, people to call. Reached out to her coworkers, didn't hear back right away. And so I was just about to call her upstairs neighbor to be like, go down and knock on her door. She's like, "Oh my god, I was in an early meeting. I forgot to text you. Everybody's in this meeting. I'm so sorry." So like all the coworkers that I would have like everybody was just in this meeting, and it was, 11:45, and I was like, "You're not dead." And so now we have a joke of like if we're getting antsy, one of us will yell in all caps into the chat, "Proof of life. I need proof of life, please." And that has done so much for my well-being and feeling stable and feeling like, yeah, I can continue to live on my own as long as I'm capable in all of the different ways. Like this does really help me. It helps my mom sleep at night because she knows that Sins and I are checking in every morning, and it's just tiny things like that. It doesn't have to be, you know you have to have an extensive conversation about everything that's happening with you right now. It's just literally a bitmoji of, you know, like the little flower with the bee coming and kissing your face, like that's a nice way to start the day.
Well, the gift is beyond the Bitmojis, obviously, is the sense of consistency. We
Yes.
mentioned in one of the earlier points of the importance of being able to check in, but those check-ins really find their value if you're accustomed to checking in. And
Yeah.
yes, the best time to start checking in with friends and building this habit was 10 years ago. The second best time is now.
Now.
Now is,
Right
is a
now.
is a perfect day one to say, "Hey, friends, let's get a little bit weird." And I promise it'll only be weird for the first couple weeks, but let's get in the habit of checking in. Um,
Mhm.
Check in when it's a great day. Check in when it's a nothing day. Check in when it's a
Yeah.
bad day. It's all worth checking in on. And
Yeah.
and yeah, it's that again is suicide prevention. That is
Yes. You're
is
absolutely
grief
right. I never thought about it.
maintenance.
Yes, it is absolutely grief maintenance, and it is care, and it is community. Yeah.
I just read a tweet today. It was a quote from poet Bell Hooks, and I'm
Yes.
gonna butcher the actual words. I apologize for not having it up right in front of me, but the point was in really identifying the values, the value of independence, um,
Mhm.
being wary of codependence,
Mhm.
but being mindful that we are interdependent, and
Absolutely.
not to let these be different buckets.
Yeah.
But while we want to make sure that you are not trapped in codependent relationships, be aware that we are interdependent. That
Yeah.
Deanna, even just today, having never met you until an hour ago, you have so flavored this campaign that we're in for suicide
Ah,
prevention. You flavored this
yeah,
this day
you
that I
too.
am interdependent on your wisdom, on
I
your
feel the
empathy.
same.
Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And and again, kind of going back to this sense of consistency, the consistency will give gravity to your questions of, hey,
Mhm.
you good? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Something feels off. If
Yeah.
you are part of someone's life, checking in, even just for moments, even just 30 seconds a day to start your day,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, friend, I love you. I'm thinking of you. How can I prove my love to you?" And maybe they'll just say,
Yes.
"Send me a Bitmoji," or maybe they'll
Y
say, man, I could really use a phone call at 2 o'clock today. Like, but
Yeah.
having that consistency is going to open the door to
Yeah.
ways we can continue to care for each other and practice this interdependence.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, that it's so easy to go to kind of extremes in our heads. Our brains are wired for binary thinking. Basically,
Mm,
every decision that we make is a 0 or a 1 of yes, no, this, yes, no, this, yes, no, this, and it pushes us into very kind of like strata of this or this. This is the only way to do things. Um, and it can be really fluid. I sent a text to someone that I actually don't even know that well, but I just hadn't heard from in a long time, and we had some pretty deep conversations, and it's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" I haven't, because I realized at some point, just kind of hit me that I haven't seen her post online recently. I haven't seen it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm really shitty. Things are real bad right now, and we ended up on the phone and talking and, whatever, whatever. So it's like it can be, getting into the practice of it yourself
mm,
um opens you up to receiving it, and then also, yeah, opens up the potential for that consistency to really help you navigate it. I mean, if I send the Bitmoji with the person who's, like, under the covers and just, like, their face is sticking out, like, this is very typical of me, I'm just like, "Uh-oh, I can't human today." Like, she knows that means I can't human today, and she's like, "You good? You need anything?" I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna human." So, yeah, it's, you can be generous with yourself and um, give yourself space to have some fluidity in it. It doesn't have to be hard and strict.
yeah. Where words fail, Bitmojis can speak
Yeah.
volumes. Deanna, this has been an absolute joy. Even in the midst, I acknowledge how odd it is to say talking about suicide prevention can be joyous, but I do
But it
believe
is.
that the conversations we're having, um, it spans, the entire breadth of human experience, that
Yeah,
we can talk about the heavy while endearing ourselves to the lighter parts. We can talk
sure.
about the moments that feel crushing, adjacent to the moments where we just found a new hairdo for a Bitmoji. And
Hell yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
really, really filled with the gratitude of your
Same.
time and
I
your wisdom.
absolutely. I'm in gratitude for this podcast and creating the space for these conversations, because it does feel so difficult for a lot of people, and y'all are making space for this work to happen. And so that's super, super critical. And I think that, honestly, my whole take is I just often, even in my most most worst depressive episodes, I just feel like being a human is so absurd. Like, just the prospect of being a human is absurd.
Mm.
And adding more absurdity to it, it's like, well, why not?
No, absolutely. But turning the microphone solely over to you, Deanna, knowing that words like "you are loved" and "you'll get through this," and just sending you a cat picture hanging onto a branch saying "hang in there," um, ain't gonna get it done. What might
Yeah.
you say to someone who is struggling and listening right now?
Yeah. Um, I go straight back to my friend Vu, and I say, "I am with you. Oh, I am with you so hard. It is so, so hard right now, and I wish I could just wrap myself around it." Um, the other thing I would say is I have come to learn, that the demons in your head are liars. They are filthy, stinking liars. And whatever it is that they are plaguing you with, that is the chink that they happen to find in your armor. And now the hordes of demons are flooding in. Um, but you are still here and you're listening to this, which means you've still got something going on there. And I am here for that. And I think it's badass that you're even showing up in this way, even if it's like, you ever do that thing where it's like you're so tired and you're on the couch and you can't reach the remote. And so you just like don't even turn anything off, or like you try to download an app for your phone that is a remote TV because it's easier than trying to sit up and get the remote. Like, I'm with you so hard. And I'm gonna keep fighting like hell, and I hope that you'll stick around, however best you can, because this is it, man.
Man. Well, let's go ahead and stop this because I could gush over it for another hour.